Greetings, fellow path seekers. Today I want to talk about the Meus Racing Isokinetic axles. Over the last year, these axles have pretty much taken the RC world by storm because they add a little bit of width. They add front weight bias with brass knuckles and brass diff covers. They also add low center of gravity weight by adding aluminum housings. And they also add 52 degrees of steering angle. Unless you live under a rock, you have probably, oh goodness, heard of these axles and heard how great they are. But there's a newcomer that has come to challenge the Meus axles, and this is the Injora planted axles. These also offer some added width, they offer added weight, they offer front biased weight, and improved steering angle over stock. That is phenomenal. But there are some major differences between these two axles, and I like one way better than the other. So let's talk about the differences. So the number one reason people are going to go with axles like this is to be able to get the turning, and also the weight and the bias and the width. But these might not fit your build, especially the Meus axles. There are some builds that I have tried these on that I don't really like them on. So let's talk about the issues that I've had first. So first, before anything, I actually did have some quality control issues with the Meus axles. The lug nuts were the wrong sizes, and I put a micrometer on them, or a caliper, whatever you want to call it, and they were the wrong size. They didn't fit in the wrench. One of them was smaller than the other three, and so it came out kind of weird. Ooh, getting a little hung up. There it is. And also, when I went to install the supplied stock drive gears, I'm not going to call them underdrive gears like Meus calls them. I'll explain why I'm not going to call them that in a minute. Ooh. The axle shafts were actually the wrong size. Again, proved it with a caliper. And they didn't fit. I had to file on the stock axle shafts in the rear to make them fit. Nevertheless, these still improve the performance of your RC, but I've heard people making some statements that I just don't agree with. People commented on my review of these because I was really hard on them for some problems that they have, and they talked about how they make any RC better. They make any scx24 better. They actually said that since I don't like them, I must just be a beginner who doesn't know how to build. And I'm just going to throw the whole thing out there for you right now. These axles are going to require a lot more upgrades than just the axles. If you just put them on a stock rig, not only is it not going to work, you're apparently going to get made fun of by the Meus Mafia, who wants to declare, oh dear, that these are just the greatest axles ever. But there are some problems. Oh dear. So the first rig that I tried my Meus axles on was my Gladiator, and I like to have the Gladiator be able to flex. I enjoy the articulation a lot, okay? But I don't have an upgraded frame on it. I want to keep it scale looking. I don't want an angled skid plate and then to be cutting under the back of the doors, so I'm just keeping the stock frame on it for now. And it did not play well with the frame. It kept hanging up because I have a Reefs 99 servo under here. If you got a different servo with different ears, it might not hit, but what I really want to do is use a mountless servo. I have a Eco Power full metal servo on here, and I have a Torque metal servo on the little JLU over there, and these never interfere with the articulation because they're so much narrower and the wires come out the back. It's just such a better design. But I couldn't use that with these because the version 1 Meus axles have a different pattern for the mounting bracket of the servo on top, which means you have to use their servo mount. I also like to talk about how much of a pain this servo mount is to install because you have to put in these two ears, then mount your servo and put those two screws in. Then you can finally put the two screws through the top of the axle and put it together. That's a lot of screws. I have seen videos of other people running these in a competition where it actually fell apart and your servo started flopping back and forth. People have told me that that's kind of a ludicrous claim and you should just use Loctite. But that means that these are more expensive because you have to go and buy Loctite as well, and Loctite is messy. Loctite's hard to work with. I actually got some Loctite in the shocks when I was working on Scout the other day, and all of a sudden my Scouts were glued in the down position, and it was a pain to try and clean it out. So Loctite is not always a good thing, and you know what? You don't have to use Loctite on these mountless servos because those two screws in the bottom, I have thrashed this thing, and I have never had those screws come loose. This yeah, you're probably going to want to Loctite it. Another thing, it does come with a steering linkage, okay? And you get these 2 metal rods with 4 plastic ends, and you have to thread these ends on. And it is a pain. It's very easy to assemble it backwards and to assemble it improperly. And it's not reliable because this little joint here, there's nothing keeping it from just popping off and flying upwards. And I actually had it happen while I was driving. That would be, I guess, an on-course repair, again, if you were in a competition. If we look at the newcomer, the Injoras, that's very unlikely. There's a screw there. I guess you could Loctite it. I haven't Loctited mine, and I haven't seen it walking, and I've been driving it quite a bit. So it does come with a steering linkage, but it's a pain to assemble. It is the hardest thing to assemble out of anything I've assembled on an RC so far. It's kind of ugly. To be honest, it hangs up on a lot of stuff because it sticks out the front. And there's a lot of resistance in these plastic ball ends where without the servo on, if you just grab the tie rod, not the tie rod, sorry, if you just grab the drag link and pull it back and forth, there's resistance that the servo is having to fight all the time when it's pulling there. That is not there on the other axles that I have. It's not a great steering linkage. I don't really like it. Ugh. Now, please don't accept what you're seeing for driving as a total comparison, because this is a different build. This is a version 1 ESC. It also has a 50-turn motor, which should be slower and torqueier. And also, I don't have another set of the same tires to put on this build right now. Let's see. Ooh. Nevertheless, I'm just driving this because I feel awkward just sitting on a bench and talking about RCs when RCs are meant to be driven. So I'm just putting this rig together and driving it so that I have something to drive while I talk. Can I back up? Oh. Nevertheless, for the sake of comparison, I did take the Meus axles and put them on the exact same Jeep with the same motor, same ESC, and the same wheels and tires, and drove them in the same drainage rocks on the side of a road. Chose the drainage rocks because that's a really hard technical section where it's going to kind of reveal any issues with the axles. And there were some issues with these. So let's talk about the false advertising that Meus is doing. They're claiming that it comes with underdrive gears. No, it doesn't, because a stock scx24 is driven with two 16T gears. These come with two 14 gears. That is a 14% increase in the gear ratio. That means that this truck is going 14% faster, and it comes overdriven 14% in the front axle and in the rear axle. What it comes with is a set of stock 216 gears. So right now what I have, because I filed it, I have stock gears in the rear, and I have 14% faster gears in the front axle. I can't show you this because they are within the differentials. This means the whole rig is kind of jumpy, and compared to the Injora axles, it can't go as slow. So some people are complaining about the Injora Planet axles because when you buy these, you get the servo mount, you get the steering linkage, you get a rear upper link mount, and you get rear underdrive gears. Actually, you get rear stock gears because you're overdriven, and the whole thing is overdriven, which means if you actually want to have stock gearing and just drive slow and with the same gearing front and back, you can't do that. But with the Injora axles, you can. In fact, let's demonstrate this by driving with the Injora axles. So the Planet axles are the newcomers, and right off the bat, when I compared them, the slow speed crawl is so much better because they're just 14% slower than the other ones. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, why don't I just change the gears in the Meus axle? Well, just like we had a problem with the steering servo mount, where it's proprietary and you have to use theirs, the front gears are proprietary. The rear are standard. So you could actually put whatever underdrive gears or overdrive gears you want in the rear. If you wanted more overdrive, you could leave the front gears in the Meus axles, and then you could underdrive the rear further with like 11% underdrive to end up with 25% overdrive in the front. But the thing is, with the Injora axles here, ooh, we're going to flip if I go down that. With the Injora axles here, I can underdrive the front, woo, and underdrive the rear. There we go. If I want to put 11% underdrive gears front and back and have the same gearing but be underdriven, I can do that. If I want to underdrive both axles by 30%. I can do that. If I want to underdrive the front 10% and then the rear 30% so that I end up with 20% underdrive, but end up with a slower moving rig, whew, I can do that. Come on now. Ooh, it pulled out of that. I can do that with these Injora axles because it uses a stock gear. So, understanding more about how the axles work, I now know why it has a special front gear, because when you turn like this, that front axle shaft actually gets pulled out just a little bit and pushed back in sometimes. So there has to be kind of a shoulder on that center worm drive gear. And the Meus axles, to make sure that the axles won't slip out, have a very generous shoulder. But this means it has to have a proprietary front gear. They may offer different gearing in the front, but again, you'll end up having to buy it from Meus. And here's an interesting thing. In the advertising for the Planet axles, it advertises as approximately 52 degrees. Well, if I turn both of these trucks off and turn the axles all the way, it seems to me that the Meus actually turns a little bit further. I think their proprietary gear might be giving them a little bit more steering. However, the caveat to this is that, oh, can we make it up that? Is that I can max out the steering on the Planet axles on this Jeep. They are turning full lock to lock and hitting the stops. But on the Meus axles, I am not. I have to turn the dual rate down a little bit, and it has some more left in it, but I can't reach it all with the build that I have it on. So effectively, while crawling in the field, there we go, they are the same. There is no advantage in the steering with the Meus over the Injora axles. However, it might have 1 or more degrees. So that might be some advertising shenanigans on the Injora side, because they're claiming they're 52 approximately, when they probably know that it's actually like 51.5 or 50 degrees. But Meus is not innocent either, because Meus is claiming to give you underdrive gears when actually you're overdriven and you're faster than stock. When I compared these on the rocks, the Meus axles were harder to drive, and I kept nose diving into holes because it was jumpy, because the axles were overdriven and they just are faster than I want them to be. These are really far too big a rock to be crawling on with a mini. But I guess if we want to do the ultimate axle test, tiny truck's got to do what a tiny truck's got to do. Okay. Now, I didn't have the underdrive gears in the rear. I do have them in now. I don't feel like they make a difference. It still feels a little jumpy to me, and it's faster than I want on this brushed motor. It's a 66-turn Reaper motor, if you were wondering. And it's fair enough. Fair enough. The Meus axles come with that gear, and the Injoras do not. But it's only a $10 upgrade. And so, if these axles are the same price, I would rather pay $10 extra and have the Injora axles, just because I would pay $10 to never have to assemble the steering linkage on the Meus axles ever again. The steering linkage on the Injora axles is really easy. It's just like, whoa, just bumped that trigger. It's just like the steering linkage on my Super 8s, where you have ball joints on each end. So you have 6 little O-rings to attach, and then 4 little, is it 6? No, 8 O-rings, and then you have 4 little ball joints to put in, and it's really easy to do. What's more, this seems to hang up on less stuff. It looks better. It looks more scale. It's beveled on the bottom, so it seems to pop over things better. These axles on the exact same build really do handle better than the Meus axles. And this is due to several factors. One being the differential, because you can see this is very small and round. It looks a lot like an old school Toyota axle. And these are these diamond-shaped axles, which are a very scale axle. If you're doing a scale build, you may need axles that have that, but it's bigger, it's got square angles on it, and it gets hung up on stuff. On top of that, the steering linkage can hit things. The gearing, like I said before, the gearing is making the Meus axles harder to control on a brushed motor. Some people are going to say, well, just run brushless. Can I just get on a soapbox for a minute? There are people who are telling me that I just don't know how to build on my review video for the Meus axles because the axles, if they aren't getting along, they say, you just don't know how to build and you don't know what you're talking about. Okay, maybe, but shouldn't we be able to tell beginners the problems that they're going to face with their build? Not everyone can put a cheat code chassis on there and steel drive shafts, steel transmission, and a brushless motor right off the bat, and long travel shocks. And some of us are trying to upgrade our rigs little bit by little bit, okay? If you upgrade them completely and overhaul every single part of it, the Meus axles are going to be very close to the Injora axles. Maybe even better because they can steer a little bit better. But you have to build around the axles. And the Injora axles, you don't have to build around them so much because they're geared with stock gears. They use stock steering knuckles. They use stock pattern servo mounts. Now here's another caveat. The version 2 of the Meus axles, they actually now have the same differential as the Injora axles. It dropped about a week later. So clearly, Meus took that as a threat that they were trying to steal their business. And it has the same differentials, and now it accepts the standard servo mount, but it still has some of the same problems. One being, look at these steering knuckles, okay? You see that bolt hanging down, and you see how big this steering knuckle is? If we go to the Injora set, the steering knuckle is smaller, smoother, and there's no bolt sticking down. So these still, even against the version 2s, are going to get hung up less, and they have proper gearing to be able to use it with just a brushed motor. Guys, running this with a 66-turn 050 motor, these axles have super good low-speed control, and I'm really enjoying driving them. The version 1 is a little jumpy that I'm demonstrating today, but I can show you some of the test footage. Even with that same Jeep, the Meus axles are jumpy because of the gearing, which wouldn't be a problem if I could change the gearing. But you can't change the gearing on the Meus axle. So what I am trying to say is that while both axles provide you with a lot of improvement, both axles probably won't fit every single build. For one, the articulation issue on my Gladiator was a problem, and I didn't like the way that servo played with my frame. For two, the width was a problem on our Bronco build. Here is me and my sister's Bronco. We share it. We both paid for part of it. I had the Meus axles on here for a long time, but it really blows out the proportion of the scale look of the Bronco, which the Bronco is so scale looking. We love this thing. So I actually swapped it back to stock axles, and I have upgraded U-joints in there, so we are getting more turning radius. Ooh, that screw's starting to back out. I gotta fix that. And so we're getting more turning radius. I've got brass knuckles. I've got overdrive gears. You can do a lot of the same things that the Meus axles have and keep the same width if you're trying to get a scale-looking Bronco, and boy, does this thing look nice. If you want just a little bit of width, you might want to consider going with these Injora axles because they're smoother. Oh, I did that line wrong. They're smoother. They work better on technical sections because there's less to get hung up on. They can flex better because you can use a mountless servo. And they have the proper gearing, and it gives you the options. If you wanted to change these steering knuckles to something heavier or something lighter, you could, because I'm told these use stock pattern knuckles. Meus are proprietary. If you want to change the gears to something slower because you want to drive it slower, or you want to drive it much, much faster, let's say you want to build a race rig and put really overdriven gears in, you can use the Injora. Meus is proprietary. What I'm trying to say is that the Meus axles, if they are what you want 14% overdrive, you want that steering linkage, you want that servo mount, then these are great. They do work. But the problem is, if you don't want to build a rig that's exactly like everyone else's, if you want to be able to use it on a stock rig and not have to go brushless and not have to get an aftermarket frame to be able to use them, well, the Injoras are a little more user-friendly right off the bat. Another upgrade, another upgrade to consider, they're now selling these with a servo mount and a servo for about $100. I have more than $100 into these and the mountless servo that I got, so I guess I would have saved a little bit of money, but I'm really liking this torque servo and how it works right now. That was a really cool line. The difference driving them, it just seems like night and day. You can just see how slow and controlled these are on a 66-turn motor. The Meus gears don't play well. If you want to go brushless just so you can use your Meus axles, that's fine. But for the rest of us who want... Oh my goodness, did I just beach myself? So if you just want to go brushless and you want to use an aftermarket chassis system and you're going to overhaul your whole rig and you already have a set of Meus axles, I mean, they work. If you want to get the version 2s or the nylon versions of the Meus axles, they do work. I'm not going to say they don't work or that they're incapable, but what I am saying is they may not be what you want, and it's okay to not like them and to want to use something else. I much prefer the Injora Planet axles. I like the look better. I like the fit and finish better. I like the way it plays with my rig better. And I like the gearing better. Now, Injora, if you can hear me, which I know you can hear me because you hearted my comment, and then you actually did what the comment said. You took my money. So they released these without a rear upper link mount, and I bought them. But then everyone complained that, you know, it doesn't come with a rear upper link mount. The Meus comes with a rear upper link mount. The version 2 Meus axles that look just like the Injora axles, except actually more scale because they added some scale details to the front. The version 2s have a fixed rear upper link mount, which is cool. That's very cool. But you don't need it. I'm actually running, let's see if we can see it when I go over this. See in there? I'm actually running the stock rear upper link mount. I don't need it. So Injora, if you can hear me, we want to be able to buy these without being forced to pay for a $10 rear upper link mount that we don't want. Now, I bought mine, and then they sent me one afterwards, which is cool. So I actually got a free upper link mount. But for the rest of you who are going to buy them now, you can't do it without paying $10 for a rear upper link mount. That's kind of annoying. I want to be able to buy it without the rear upper link mount. And also, another thing, Injora, I would like to be able to buy just a front axle. They haven't offered that option yet. I'd love to be able to buy a nylon version as well. But being able to buy it just a front axle would mean I could do a four-wheel steer rig, and I would really enjoy that. And so here's a hypothetical for me. If I can get a second Injora... So let's run through a hypothetical situation that we can't do yet because Injora hasn't offered it yet. If we can buy just a front axle, then I could buy two front axles, and I could gear them at whatever gear set I want. Can't do that with the Meus. If you run two Meus axles, you are 14% overdriven, and there's not going to be any way to have underdrive until they come out with underdrive gear sets for the front, or for the steering axles, because of their proprietary gears. But with the Injoras, I could do this right now. They just need to be able to sell me one front axle. That, or I'll have two rear axles sitting around that I don't need. And I can gear it however I want. And then, because it uses stock steering knuckles, you'd be able to run lighter plastic ones to keep your front weight bias going on. Maybe even offer a plastic or an aluminum rear diff cover would be cool too, Injora. Guys, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to tell you how to spend your money. I'm not trying to tell you that Meus axles are terrible and everyone that uses them is dumb. If you have them on all of your builds and you love them, that's great. But I don't love them on every single one of my builds. If I want more scale looks, I go with a stock axle and I upgrade it. If I want slight performance upgrades, but I want to keep it looking class 1 scale, then I go with these Injora axles. I say slight. Actually, these provided a huge amount of improvement. But if I'm going crazy crawler mode, I'm going to go with Little Guy Racing Parts Super 8s over there. So because of the gearing and the steering, because the steering linkage is better, and it lets me use the servo that I like, and it has good gears that work with cheap motors, These are just a better budget and beginner option, if you ask me. And I love them. I could crawl with these all day. Oh! Lucky! Woo. But let me know in the comments, what is your favorite axle to put under a rig? Personally, I don't have one. I have a favorite axle for this rig. I have a favorite axle for my Gladiator. I like different axles for different purposes, but if you're going to compare these directly to the Meus axles, the steering knuckles are better. The differential is better than the version 1. I like being able to pick my servo mount. I like not having to pay for a servo mount that I don't like. I like the steering linkage. And most importantly, I can use whatever gears that I need to because the gearing makes the rock crawler. Using low gears is where we get all that torque and low speed control. And forcing everyone to use 14% higher gear ratios is kind of a pain. Not everyone wants overdrive. I'm seriously thinking about, just because I can, I like the way this crawls, but just to prove a point, I'm thinking maybe one of these days I'm going to put 11% underdrive in the front and then 33% underdrive in the rear and have 22% overdrive, but have the whole rig driven slower so I have more low speed control. You can't do that with a Meus axle. I don't even feel like I need underdrive on this. This thing handles great, it steers great, it drives fine. I just like them better. But go ahead and let me know what you think in the comments. If you don't like my opinions, that's okay, because leaving a comment still helps other people see the video so that they too can see that maybe the Meus axles are not perfect and they're not the best, and maybe they want to go with the Injoras. I'm not paid by any company. I bought these Injora axles myself. I was given the Meus axles for Christmas, so I guess they were technically a gift, but I didn't get them from Meus, and I don't owe Meus anything. I don't hate Meus either. There's some other Meus products I want to try, but I'm trying to give you guys an honest opinion and an honest comparison so you can see what you want and what you don't want, what you need, what will work, and what might not work. Thank you so much for watching today. If you want to see more, there's a way to do that here on YouTube, but I'm not going to tell you how because everyone else says it, and I know you can figure it out for yourself. Until next time, remember to pull a winch line for your buddy every once in a while. Stay safe and stick to the old paths.
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness. Holy shit's back there.
Wow. Literally speechless.
Where do we park?